Have you ever looked at the people of a nation and, truly wondered what makes them look so distinct? Or maybe why there's such an incredible variety even within one country? Today, we're taking a deep dive into Iran. It's a land whose people are often described as, well, a living reflection of millennia of history, empires, deserts, mountains, migrations, all of it. Our mission today is really to unpack that rich tapestry. We want to explore Iranian appearances beyond any single simple stereotype. We'll look at how history, genetics, culture, how they've all sort of intertwined to create this astonishing diversity you see across the Iranian plateau.
And we're drawing from a really fascinating set of sources for this. We've got genetic studies, historical accounts going way back, modern anthropological surveys, cultural insights. Quite a stack. All of it helps us understand why, as one source put it beautifully, every shade of skin, every eye color, every facial angle carries echoes of the many, many groups who've passed through this land. You'll find that asking why Iranians look so different, well, it's basically like reading history written right there on the human face.
History written on the human face. That's a powerful image.
Okay, let's unpack that idea then. Iran as a living reflection of history. You mentioned it being a bridge.
Absolutely. Historians always stress this point. Iran has always been this vital bridge between worlds. I mean, think about it. It connects Central Asia, the Middle East, the Caucasus, and even reaches towards South Asia. This unique spot on the map wasn't just about trade routes. It meant Iran was like a natural crossroads, absorbing wave after wave of people over thousands of years. Just think about the major influences. You've got the huge Achaemenid Empire, then Alexander the Great bringing Hellenistic culture. Later, the Arab conquest brought Islam, followed by, significant Turkic and Mongol migrations and invasions. Each of these big events didn't just change who was in charge or the main religion. They brought new populations, new genes, new ways of life, and these inevitably mixed with the people already there.
Wow, that's an incredible amount of movement and mixing over centuries. So, given all that history, how does it actually show up in the genetics of Iranians today? What's the science telling us? Right, this is where it gets really interesting. And the science gives us some concrete numbers. Genetic studies, some pretty recent ones from 2017, they revealed something fascinating. Iranians today carry roughly 65–70% ancient Iranian plateau ancestry. That's like the foundational layer, the deep roots. But, and this is crucial, that's not the whole picture. That core ancestry is mixed with about 10–15% from the Arabian Peninsula, then another 10% from Turkic and Central Asian groups, and maybe 5–10% from Caucasian and Mediterranean peoples. It's this genetic mixing, this admixture that's so important. And this blending is really key to understanding the diversity. It explains perfectly why, some Iranians might look quite similar to their Arab neighbors, while others might look more like people from Turkey or Armenia to the north and west. And then you have others who show traits that might remind you of South Asians or even Europeans. It's truly a genetic mosaic. Each piece tells part of Iran's story.
Okay, so we have this genetic mosaic as the foundation. Let's zoom in now on what that actually looks like. What are some of the most visible physical traits that show this diversity? Skin tone, eye color.
Well, skin tone is definitely one of the most striking. It covers a remarkably wide range, probably much wider than many people outside Iran might assume. If you go north, say near the Caspian Sea or the Caucasus Mountains, you'll find lighter olive and fairer skin tones are quite common. But as you move south, towards the central deserts or the southern coasts along the Persian Gulf, you start seeing medium brown to darker shades become much more dominant. And this shift isn't random. It's influenced partly by climate, of course, but also significantly by that historical Arabian admixture we mentioned, centuries of contact across the Gulf. We have some numbers on this too. Surveys suggest around 55% of Iranians fall into those light to medium olive ranges. Then about 30% are in the darker brown categories. And a noticeable 15% or so have very fair skin, often seen up north and among groups like Persians, Azeris, and Kurds. It really paints a picture.
That's really interesting. And our sources mention that skin tone itself can sometimes be a sensitive, a controversial topic within Iran.
Yes, that does come up, and it touches on complex issues around beauty standards and history. Historically, well, there has been a tendency in some circles to privilege fairer complexions. Sometimes this was tied to old ideas about Persian aristocracy, and later maybe reinforced by European influences. It creates these complex internal dynamics about identity. But at the same time, you have darker tones, especially down south in places like Khuzestan, Hormozgan, Baluchistan, which are deeply proudly tied to ancient local lineages, maritime trade links with Africa and South Asia.
Yeah.
So these represent a different kind of authentic heritage,
Yeah.
It's not straightforward. Both light and dark carry significant cultural meaning and history.
Right, a complex picture. Okay, from skin, let's shift to eyes. Iran seems renowned for having a wider spectrum of eye colors than just brown, doesn't it?
Absolutely. While dark brown is still the most common, maybe around 70% of people,
Mm.
what's really noticeable is how common hazel, green, and even blue eyes are, especially compared to much of the Middle East. Genetic studies actually back this up. They found nearly a quarter, about 25% of Iranians carry the genetic variants, the alleles, for lighter eye colors. And this isn't evenly spread. You see it more in the northern and western regions. For example, among Kurdish and Azeri populations, you often see higher rates of green and hazel eyes. And blue eyes, while less common, they do appear, sometimes clustered in families in places like Gilan and Mazandaran, often linked to historical ties with Caucasian peoples. And it's not just biology, it's woven into the culture. I remember one source mentioning how Persian poetry for centuries has celebrated emerald eyes and sapphire eyes. It shows this diversity is really part of the national image, at least historically.
That's fascinating how culture reflects biology like that. What about hair? Is it a similar story of variety hidden within a dominant trait?
Yes, very similar. The common perception is dark, thick hair, and that's true for many. Around 65% probably have straight or slightly wavy black hair. But then you have about 20% with distinctly wavy or even curly textures. This is much more common among southern and coastal groups, again reflecting different genetic mixes and maybe climate adaptation. And then there's color variation too. Maybe 10–15% have naturally lighter brown or chestnut hair. Again, often seen more in Kurdish, Azeri, and Caspian populations. Our sources even point out occasional instances of natural auburn or blonde shades. And importantly, these aren't just recent imports. They're seen as legacies of older Central Asian and Caucasian ancestry within Iran itself.
So we've got this amazing mosaic in skin, eyes, hair. Does this variety extend to, say, facial structures? Or even things like height? Are there distinct regional looks?
It certainly does. The actual architecture of the face, and even overall build, can differ quite noticeably by region. It gives each area its own kind of characteristic look, you could say. So if you're in the central Persian plateau, think Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, you might see more oval faces, often straighter noses, and those common olive skin tones. But travel northwest to the Azeri regions. You'll often notice lighter skin, maybe broader cheekbones, and a higher chance of lighter hair and eyes. Then head west to the Kurdish areas. People there are often noted for stronger jawlines, sometimes taller or more prominent noses, and those striking hazel or green eyes we mentioned. The Luz and Bakhtiari, mountain peoples from the Zagros range, often have more rugged features, sometimes darker skin, high cheekbones. You get a sense of that mountainous heritage. Down south in Khuzestan or Hormozgan near the Gulf, you'll likely see darker complexions, maybe fuller lips, curlier hair, reflecting those historical links to Arabia and even East Africa. And way out east, the Baluch people often have darker skin too, sharper noses, and sometimes a noticeable resemblance to populations in neighboring South Asia. It's really quite distinct region by region.
That paints such a clear picture of regional variation. Are there like actual scientific measurements that back this up, numbers that show these differences?
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just based on casual observation. There are anthropological surveys, one from 2019, for instance, that measured these things precisely. They found really significant differences, like up to a 16% variation in nasal indices. That's a measure of nose shape between northern and southern groups, and a 12% variation in the ratio of facial width to height. Our sources highlighted that this level of variation is actually among the highest recorded anywhere in West Asia. It's pretty strong quantitative proof of just how distinct the histories of these regional populations are within Iran.
Wow, among the highest in West Asia. That's quite something. Okay, beyond the face, what about height and general build? Do we see regional patterns there too?
Yes, we do. Even something like average height shows these regional nuances. Nationally, the average Iranian man today is about 174 centimeters. That's around 5 foot 8.5. Women average 161 centimeters, so about 5 foot 3.5. This is from 2020 data. But break it down regionally. Northern Iranians, people from the Caspian area, Kurdish groups, they tend to be taller on average. Men there often reach 178 centimeters. Central Iranians are usually around that national average. And then southern and southeastern groups tend to be slightly shorter, with men averaging maybe 171 centimeters. And there's an interesting trend, too. Our sources point out that Iranians, on the whole, have gotten significantly taller by nearly 10 centimeters, or 4 inches over the last 50 years or so. That's one of the biggest increases in the region, and it's thought to be linked mostly to better nutrition and increased urbanization across the country.
Okay, so if we pull all these threads together now, the deep history, the complex genetics, all these regional variations in skin, eyes, hair, face shape, height, What does this really tell us about the idea of a typical Iranian look? It sounds like the sources are basically saying there isn't one.
You're absolutely spot on. That's a critical point, and it's something felt quite strongly inside Iran, too. Outsiders might have this default image, maybe the Persian look, light skin, dark hair, dark eyes, but within Iran, identity is just so much more complex. You have major groups like Kurds, Azeris, Arabs, Baluch, Lurs, Turkmen, dozens more, really. Each challenges that idea of a single, uniform Iranian appearance. They all contribute their own unique features to the national picture.
And you mentioned these internal discussions or debates around identity. How much does this idea of appearance actually matter, say, politically or culturally, in terms of representation?
Well, it definitely raises important questions. Some minority groups, for example, feel they aren't fully represented in national media or even politics. They see a certain Persian look dominating movies, TV, advertising. This can lead to feelings of being overlooked or questions about who gets to define what Iranian looks like. But then you have many others who argue really passionately that Iran's true beauty, its real strength, lies precisely in this diversity, that trying to fit everyone into one box misses the point entirely. For them, celebrating the whole mosaic is what truly reflects the nation.
Right. To make this really concrete, imagine walking down Valia Street in Tehran. Our sources give this great image. You might see, say, a young woman with those striking green eyes and chestnut hair having tea. Then maybe a southern man with darker skin and curly hair selling dates nearby. A Kurdish couple walks past, maybe taller, sharper features, and a Zuri family chatting in Persian but with a Turkish accent. You see all these echoes, right?
Exactly. That image captures it perfectly. And this diversity brings up a whole range of emotions. There's immense pride involved. Many Iranians feel deep pride in their specific ancestry, whatever it is. Families might highlight certain features, lighter eyes, fairer skin as marks of beauty, perhaps linked to certain lineages. But others will equally celebrate darker tones, curlier hair, as symbols of their own authentic heritage, strength, maybe resilience. Yet, alongside that pride, stereotypes and sometimes discrimination can unfortunately still exist. Minorities might occasionally face comments about not looking Iranian enough, which can be really hurtful, as our sources suggest.
But this story isn't finished, is it? It sounds like things are changing, evolving.
Precisely. It's definitely not static. We're seeing a real push, especially from younger generations who are, globally connected. Things like social media campaigns are actively celebrating all kinds of Iranian faces. You might see posts featuring dark-skinned Bandari dancers from the South, right alongside images of fair, maybe even blonde-haired farmers from Mazandaran in the North. It feels like a very conscious reclaiming of national identity, celebrating it as this rich, inclusive tapestry and pushing back against any narrow, exclusive stereotype. It's quite powerful to see.
So I think we have our answer then. The science, the history, the culture, they all point to the same conclusion. There really is no single Iranian look. Instead, Iran is like a living museum of humanity. Persians, Arabs, Kurds, Azeris, Baluch, Lurs, Turkmen. So many threads woven together over millennia. The differences aren't contradictions. They're just distinct chapters in this incredible ongoing story.
hmm And that diversity, as the sources show, it's both a challenge. It makes Iran harder to define easily, but it's also a profound strength. It makes the country infinitely richer, more complex, and frankly more fascinating to understand.
So what makes Iran's people look so different? The answer seems both simple and incredibly deep. It's geography, it's genetics, it's millennia of history, all converging on the Iranian plateau, written, as you said, right there on the human face. When you see an Iranian with blue eyes from Gilan and another with curly hair from Khuzestan and another with that classic profile from Isfahan, you're not seeing division. You're seeing Iran itself in its full human diversity.
Absolutely. And maybe the bigger takeaway, inspired by Iran's example, is for all of us. That maybe nations aren't about finding one single face to represent everyone. Perhaps it's more about recognizing that every face belongs to that same grand unfolding story. It really invites us to look closer at the diversity all around us, wherever we are, and just appreciate the incredible human stories etched into everyone's appearance.